Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time.
Charlotte, North Carolina are investigating a horrific random murder that took place on the city's light rail system last month. The victim, this woman you're looking at, a 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee who came to the U.S. following the Russian invasion of her country. NewsNation's Iryna Zarutska is here. Alicia, I saw the video. This is heartbreaking. Walk us through what happened.
Such heartbreaking, concerning for a lot of people, not only those in South Carolina, but if you're a mass transit person, which millions are, this is concerning. Police are saying this is actually a random attack. The killing took place August 22nd in Charlotte's upscale South End neighborhood. Surveillance video you were talking about that was released by Charlotte Area Transit shows the 23-year-old Iryna Zarutska boarding a light rail Lynx car and then sitting down in front of a man now identified as 34-year-old DeCarlo Brown Jr. After nearly 5 minutes, Brown pulls out a folding knife. He seems to be playing with it or moving it back and forth and then attacks her. Police say that Brown stabbed Zarutska 3 times, including a fatal blow to the neck before walking the length of the train and exiting. Now, transit police arrived within minutes of the attack, but she was dead and pronounced as much. Brown was arrested and charged with murder, and Charlotte's police say that he is homeless. He has a lengthy criminal record. His most recent run-in with police was back in January. He was charged with misusing 911 during an apparent mental health episode, but was never hospitalized or jailed. Police are continuing the search right now for a motive in this case, but doesn't take away from the fact that it's, a homicide and it was a heinous one.
And looking at that video, it all happened so quickly. What are public officials saying?
There's a lot of outcry, and so public officials are trying to respond as you would expect. On the public safety side, we're hearing that a lot from city officials in Charlotte. The mayor of Charlotte issuing a statement on Saturday saying in part that she is heartbroken by Zarutska's death and is, quote, thinking about what safety really looks like in the city of Charlotte. NewsNation law and justice contributor Jennifer Coffendorfer spoke with our Kelly Beeson yesterday on Prime and said, when it comes to these random, unprovoked attacks, especially on a public transit system, there's not much that can be done.
Well, they are fairly common, these attacks on these trains and subways, mass transit. And really, to me, this speaks to some of the things that hopefully the takeaways we can take. Try not to sit where people are behind you. Try not to use your cell phone. Try to be really aware of your surroundings. And this isn't victim shaming in any way. This is saying, let's learn from this horrific crime that was committed.
Yeah, some really sound advice there. It is worth noting that there is a shortage of officers in Queen City where this happened. A spokesperson for Charlotte's Lynx transit system said this week that they are short some people, nearly 15% shy of what they consider to be the ideal number for police for a light rail and bus system, given the population.
What are we learning about the victim, about Iryna Zarutska, Alicia?
Yeah, she's only been in this country a short time, fled here for her life and then lost it. What we know about her is that, she's been in here for about 2 years, North Carolina, trying to make a better life for herself here in the U.S. Zarutska her family has started a GoFundMe to help pay for funeral expenses. As of this morning, that's up to about $45,000. And she was coming home from work basically here. And then this unfortunately happened to her.
This video is going to haunt me, and I know I'm not alone. Iryna Zarutska, thank you so much for that report.
The murder of a Ukrainian refugee on a Charlotte light rail train is now making international headlines. Newly released surveillance video shows the moment that Iryna Zarutska was fatally stabbed in a horrific August assault. The suspect, who police say is a homeless man with a violent history, is waking up behind bars, being held without bond. And as investigators piece together what sparked this heinous attack, that disturbing video is raising new questions about crime, mental illness, and public safety. Do want to warn you first that this chilling footage is very hard to watch.
Iryna Zarutska fled war-torn Ukraine for a new life in Charlotte. On August 22nd, tragedy struck after she left work at a local pizzeria just before 10 p.m. and got on a city train. On her ride home, with headphones on and eyes on her phone, Iryna sat just in front of a man, now identified as DeCarlos Brown Jr. Brown pulled out a pocket knife and stabbed her 3 times in the neck. Iryna collapsed and died. Passengers rushed in to help her as Brown slipped off at the next stop, quickly arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Charlotte's mayor, Vi Lyles, called the attack senseless and tragic, pledging to make the city feel safe for everyone.
We're not going to stand for it, and we're going to come in, we're going to clean it up. You're going to be safe within 2 weeks. We're going to bring crime down because we can't have cities that are unsafe.
And Charlotte officials drawing sharp criticism from U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, who says this violent act could have been prevented, posting this on social media. This monster had a track record longer than a CVS receipt, including prison. By failing to properly punish him, Charlotte failed Iryna Zarutska and North Carolinians. This is totally unacceptable. Safety needs to be the top priority of elected officials. The case has quickly become a national flashpoint, with conservative commentators and even Elon Musk reigniting debates over justice, race, crime, and media bias. A reminder that so many in this country don't feel safe, though national crime numbers are actually down. Murders dropping nearly 15% in 2024 from the year before. And in the middle of the mounting scrutiny, an avalanche of support for Iryna's family. A fast-growing GoFundMe campaign for funeral costs has raised tens of thousands for a young woman it says came here for safety and opportunity. And neighbors describe her as a kind art school graduate with a bright future to match her radiant smile.
Just absolutely horrific. Brown is due back in court on September 19th, and Charlotte transit officials say that they're beefing up security, while Congressman Randy Fine is pushing new legislation to hold judges accountable when repeat offenders strike again, saying, quote, the 12 judges who released DeCarlos Brown Jr. should have their date in court, too. End quote there.
Aldo Rivera and conservative commentator and friend Scotty Nell Hughes. Good to have you both. Geraldo, I saw your response, and I thought that it was a very honest, emotional take about a guy, but you seem to leave out the fact that he likely can't even form the intent for the crime that he's just been charged with. Why wasn't that part of your analysis and just condemning him as a demon?
Well, I mean, that's a fair question to ask me. My response is sometimes, Chris, you're allowed to have a visceral response. Sometimes there is a deed so savage, so unhuman, so below despicable that you're allowed to be angry. And the first thing I thought of when I saw him, first of all, is if there was a cop in that car, that could have prevented it. But having seen this murderer in action, and actually to see the video of how innocent and how vulnerable his prey was, you're allowed to be absolutely sickened by it. And the first thing, I swear to God, and I understand where you're coming from because you're a compassionate, pragmatic person, and I love you. But my first thought was, what's the death penalty statute in North Carolina? So then I felt relief when the feds came in, and I knew that the death penalty would be on the table because it was a federal death penalty offense. And then I saw, when I read further, that although there has not been an execution in North Carolina since 2006, that they have firing squads. And I think that if you ask for volunteers for firing squads, they would be such a big crowd that you wouldn't be able to deal with it. Why? Because he knifed her from the back. He almost cut her head off. She came from Ukraine. I could throw up talking about it. It is sometimes it's too much. Sometimes it goes too far. And I think this is one of those cases where anyone that defends this piece of shit, shame on you. Shame on you. He knifed her in the neck, in the back, and she's on the subway.
I get it. I get it. I watched it. I think we should release the full video. I think we protect people from things. Oh, well, we don't want it to be too much. Clearly, it's not enough. because nothing creates a catalyst for change that isn't one or two media cycles of advantage of one side blaming the other. Scotty, everything Geraldo said is obviously coming from his heart and his gut, and I agree with all of it. God forbid, had that woman been someone who's in my family and I could get my hands on that guy, I would gladly surrender the rest of my life in another movement of reckless personal behavior, because I would kill the guy. There's no question. But that would be me at my worst. And that shouldn't be the instruction for society. My question is, I get why Geraldo feels how he does. He's not the president. He's not in a position of power where you are charged with doing something about it. Being pissed off can be helpful as a catalyst. But where are the solutions being offered by the Trump administration or anyone on the right for how we stop this from happening again? Shoot them all?
Well, let me just say this. First of all, Geraldo, it's been a while since I can say this. I actually agree 100% with what you said. I think absolutely. I think there's a reason why back in the 1800s they would take the horse thieves and hang them up at the clock square to make an example of them. I think for this example on here, if we're going to deter this from happening in future cases as they continue to escalate, regardless of what people want to say, crime is down, violent crime is up, and it's because people know they can get away with it. And the answers are exactly what President Donald Trump is trying to do right now and being stopped and being absolutely criticized from by the left because it is being made political. Republicans and Democrats cannot come together and say, you know what you've done for Washington, D.C. is good. It is safer now in our subways. Our streets are being able to walk safely again. Nobody, the Democrats will not give him a victory, even though it's a victory for everyone. That's why it's politicized. It's because both sides making it. So Trump is trying to, and I think that's why you saw the Pam Bondi step in and say, you know what? I can't trust the Charlotte judicial system to keep men like him off the streets from doing this again. That's why I'm going to step in. I'm going to make this an example, and the federal government got involved.
But we're pretending that this guy is just a bad guy. He is not just a bad guy. And that's what makes it hard. This is a sick, I'm telling you right now, I'll bet you guys whatever you want. If he has a competency hearing, he will not pass it. He will not stand trial. So then what? They'll cut a deal, they'll throw him in some prison, and he'll rot there for a really long time. That is not a sustainable fix any more than sending the National Guard into cities is a real crime prevention model. Okay? I have said the president is right to focus on crime. I have said he is right to do something. Whether or not you agree with what he's doing is the subject of elections. But I'm saying something different here that neither of you have addressed. And I get why with Geraldo, and I get why with you. You don't know how to stop this other than to say punish. The left sucks, that's why it happened, and we're sick of it. None of that will stop the next one.
Hold on, let me just point out here. It's amazing that we only identify people to being mentally ill after they've already committed a crime. And usually it's a horrific crime.
Not this guy.
We can't identify people if they're mentally ill walking around the streets. In
this
fact,
guy's been mentally ill for a long time.
No, but they don't.
No.
It's considered
Scotty,
politically incorrect
this guy
to say
has
somebody
been
has a mental
known,
issue.
Scotty, hold on a second. This is not an excuse structure, okay? It's not that when someone does something bad, I believe that they can't be in their right mind. You can be sick and evil. You can be evil and not sick. Or you can be sick and evil or just sick. Okay, there are all possibilities and permutations of humanity. This guy is bad and sick. I don't think he'll pass a legal intent test of competency. I don't think he'll be compos mentis. I don't think he'll be able to stand trial. There are a lot of guys like him. And we don't do anything about him, Geraldo. That's my point. Go ahead.
Chris, I understand the argument about institutionalization. Believe me, I have lived it for half a century.
You're one of the reasons we stopped it.
With a criminal.
With Willowbrook, you exposed how terrible it was. People should look it up.
And the obscenity of this man is that he creates a sentiment where institutions become a viable alternative in the mind of some. So let me just take 2 seconds to differentiate this person from the people that I'm talking about with Down syndrome or with the autistic, the people that never would commit a crime of violence ever in their existence. This man defames them. This man makes them potential victims of a drive toward reinstitutionalization. The mentally ill are different than what the population we used to call the mentally retarded, the developmentally disabled in today's language. He's different. He has 14 violent prior offenses. It is incompetence per se that he was still walking around. His own family, he stabbed his sister. This is the person that should be behind bars. There's no way on earth, Chris. For God's sake, this is a monster who is different.
We don't have enough capacity to put everybody behind bars who has a mental illness that they can't manage. Look, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be off the street because of the risk he is. Of course I do. It's still there, by the way. But of course, it was right by Alley Pond Park. I played football right there. People from there used to walk down onto the field. I know it very well.
Right. And that's the population of the criminally insane. The criminally insane, I submit, have no right, once they act out. Everybody that kills someone is crazy. I mean, I think it's crazy to kill someone. But
no,
this
I think
person
some are bad. I think some people are just bad.
He allegedly muttered racial statements that no one's talked about.
This guy's crazy.
So I'm not going to repeat them after the act.
This guy's crazy.
He had a motive. His motive was that this was a white chick. That's his motive.
Maybe.
His motive was that this is the most vulnerable, hateful to him, vile symbol to him, a blonde chick sitting in front of him in the subway.
I get it. I'm saying, what do we do about it?
I know you do.
What do we do about it?
I know you do.
So here's my question, Chris. We hold police officers that do not do their job right. We hold them accountable when things go wrong, when they could have done better. Why don't we hold Judge Stokes, the judge who let this man out, the judges that these criminals appear in front of, and then they let them back out on the streets? Why don't we hold them accountable for their action? Because obviously they're the defense that we have, the American public has.
Judges can be impeached. Judges can be removed. And by the way, on the facts, you've got the wrong judge. Okay, and it's not a gotcha. You need the judge before this judge.
Oh, wow.
This judge let him out on a misdemeanor charge for calling 911 and saying, I'm controlled by a man-made substance. He got arrested for continuously calling. They found him, and then they had a competency hearing, and he never showed. So it was gone. That's this judge, okay?
But then why didn't she reinforce it? Why didn't she go after him?
The judge before,
if he wasn't showing up for his
resources, she doesn't have the power.
Chris, why did they not automatically go find him and arrest him? He obviously isn't competent.
Because they don't have the resources. It's not a priority. They've got a million different things that we ask them to do. It was the judge before when he beat up his own sister and he got out. But then you look at that judge. What, does she like people who beat up their sisters? No. Does she want to think that every black guy should get out all the time? No. Where was she going to put him? The system is not set up for guys like this because we destroyed that system. Go ahead. Last word to you.
Agreed. The system is not set. Very, very briefly. Everybody watching right now with any experience in an urban setting, has seen this guy. Sometimes he's black, sometimes he's white, sometimes he's Asian. They've seen this guy. On the corner, he's talking to himself. He's got his own ghosts, his own terrors. You know, ordinary, prudent, normal, responsible, reasonable person, anybody, they don't have to be an expert. You know that this is a crazy, dangerous person who should be incarcerated right now in a facility for the criminally ill. He is different. He is...
Yes, agreed.
He is the nightmare.
Agreed. And I'm saying fix it. Don't say we're going to be tough, we're going to be vicious, we're going to be that. That's all bullshit. Let's be honest, okay? That's just empty talk. What are you going to do? Nothing. Because you can't pass a single piece of legislation. And this is not sexy enough to get you an executive order away. But what I'm saying is this. If you're that Ukrainian girl's families, okay, or any of these kids from these mass shootings and their families, who are all so desperate for it to never happen again, it's the only solace that they have in their coping, is that maybe something will change. We never do a damn thing. And this is a hell of a lot easier than gun control. Hell of a lot easier. And it's still not happening except just to bitch. That's my point. I don't like that it happened any more than anybody else. I don't forgive this guy for 1 second. It's what are you going to do? And that's what I'm looking at. Geraldo, I love you. I appreciate your candor. Scotty, I appreciate your perspective on this, as always, for understanding it. We got to push people to do more than just talk like we were all at the bar, because we're not at the bar. They're in power, and they're supposed to be able to do something. So do it, and then we'll vote on whether we like it or not. All right, God bless both of you, and thank you very much. I wish we had better things to talk about, but you know what? We should talk about what's hard, because, man, we're addicted to easy. We're addicted to easy.
Let me now bring in NewsNation media contributor Steve Krakauer, executive producer of The Megyn Kelly Show. You know, Steve, prominent media outlets are now being accused of covering up this attack. You got Elon Musk among those slamming the New York Times, the AP, Wall Street Journal, and others for not even covering the story. How are you diagnosing this lack of coverage and interest in the case?
Yeah, people talk a lot about political bias in media coverage. And I think one of the more undercovered versions of bias is a bias of omission. What doesn't get covered by certain media outlets? You know, to NewsNation's credit, obviously this is a massive story and it should be covered. But what we've seen, and I did a little sweep this morning before we just got on, and what we're starting to see is the kind of coverage like Axios put out today, which is Charlotte murder ignites MAGA's crime story. Like, it is now being framed as a MAGA story. This is all part of the narrative that they're going to be pushing now, which is not covering the story itself, but covering the reaction to the story. And I think that's it's telling. But I also think that it's important that this story gets shine a light on, because you know, first, there are various angles to it that make it a real story here, a real national story.
And you think about also quite a contrast in how this, you know, murder on public transit in Charlotte is being handled versus the wall-to-wall media coverage that we saw of the Daniel Penny case, you know, in New York City. What are the different factors here that, that lead to not any reporting on this from so many outlets who covered the other?
Yeah, well, I think we'd obviously be remiss to not discuss the racial aspect of this, which I think is clear, you know, no matter what. But I also think that there is the fact that this is a repeat offender, and I mean not just like a, you know, had a little bit of a crime, you know, one thing in this past, but numerous of chances where this person could not be continually out on the street, and yet he was, and that raises a lot of questions about how certain, whether it's a political party or whether it's a system, a philosophy that is letting criminals back on the street to potentially commit more crimes, and whether that's American citizens, whether that's immigrants. This is part of that story, and I think, you know, not to now politicize it again, but this is what we're hearing a lot about right now with the Trump administration when it comes to cleaning up cities with crime. Immigration raids, we're hearing about Chicago and others. There is, and the reason we're having this conversation is because it is just a winning issue. Most Americans, I think the latest polling is somewhere over 70% of Americans believe that crime is a major problem in large cities. And videos like this, and, you know, it doesn't matter if the crime stats say, well, you know, 20%, it's a 20% reduction in murder. Well, okay, what does that mean? That doesn't necessarily make people feel safer, and it also doesn't really account for what those actual numbers are. So yes, I think this is just a sad and perfect video example of what many people in America are feeling.
Yeah, and also, you and I have been on air for a couple of years now talking about, you know, the eroding of trust in media these days, and what something like this or a lack of coverage does, you know, to that as well. Steve Krakauer, I got to end it there, but thank you so much as always.
Today, I would like to address the tragedy that has not received nearly enough media attention, the brutal murder of Iryna Zarutska. Here are the facts that many outlets have shamefully and intentionally failed to report until President Trump drew attention to it. On August 22nd, Iryna Zarutska was stabbed to death on the rail system in Charlotte, North Carolina, by a savage career criminal. This is a public transportation system that many in the area use every single day to go to school and work. Iryna was on the train that night traveling home from her job at a pizzeria, still in uniform from her shift. This beautiful, innocent 23-year-old young woman was a Ukrainian refugee who had recently fled her country for a chance at a safer life and a promising new beginning here in the United States of America. But tragically, a public transportation system in a major American city was more dangerous than the active war zone that she left. The president and the entire White House are praying for her family and friends during this unimaginably difficult time. But while we extend our thoughts and prayers, we must also seek justice for this crime and call attention to this heinous incident. Surveillance video of the killing was finally released to the public this past Friday. It shows the alleged killer, DeCarlos Brown Jr., pull out a knife, get up from his seat behind Iryna, and prepare to thrust a blade into her neck before the released footage gets cut. This is pure evil on full display. The most enraging and unacceptable part of this story is that her death was entirely preventable. DeCarlos Brown never should have been on that train that night. In fact, he should have been behind bars. DeCarlos Brown has been charged with crimes no fewer than 14 times, dating back to 2011, including for armed robbery, felony larceny, breaking and entering, and shoplifting. Brown had previously served 5 years in prison for a robbery with a deadly weapon charge, and he had also forfeited bonds 3 different times, twice in 2014 and once in 2023. Despite all of this past documented criminal history, when Brown was arrested yet again in January of this past year, a Democrat judge, who I will add was a strong supporter of former Vice President Kamala Harris, released this insane criminal once again without requiring him to pay any bail. He simply had to sign a written promise to return for his court hearing. Think about how crazy it is to ask a career criminal, someone who by definition repeatedly breaks the law, to just sign a written promise and come back again another day. This is madness. This monster should have been locked up, and Iryna should still be alive. But Democrat politicians, liberal judges, and weak prosecutors would rather virtue signal than lock up criminals and protect their communities. And perhaps most shamefully of all, the majority of the media, many outlets in this room, decided that her murder was not worth reporting on originally because it does not fit a preferred narrative. Many of the journalists in this room spilled plenty of ink trying to smear Daniel Penny for defending a subway car from a deranged lunatic in New York City, but none of those same reporters lift a finger to write stories about an actual murderer. Here's the truth that every American must know. Too many innocent people across the country continue to pay the price of the failed experiment known as cashless bail that has been championed by the Democrat Party for years. All the way back in 2020, North Carolina's then Democrat Governor Roy Cooper established a so-called task force for racial equity and criminal justice. Sounds nice, but it's not. That task force was co-authored by then Attorney General and current Democrat Governor Josh Stein. It recommended, quote, reimagining public safety to, quote, promote diversion and other alternatives to arrest. It also advised to de-emphasize some felony crimes, prioritize, quote, restorative justice, and eliminate cash bail. Democrats in North Carolina and nationwide are consumed with pushing a woke, soft-on-crime agenda, no matter how many innocent Americans suffer as a result. Instead of aggressively prosecuting and locking up violent criminals, the Democrat-backed cashless bail approach lets these criminals roam free in our country to offend again and again. These reckless policies have turned too many of American cities into hunting grounds for career criminals who mock our justice system, drain law enforcement resources, and wreak havoc on law-abiding citizens. Enough is enough, and that is why President Trump is doing everything in his power by taking action to undo these absurd policies.
15 minutes to the top of the hour now. Outrage over the murder of Ukrainian immigrant Iryna Zarutska on a Charlotte light rail train is not letting up. And now Attorney General Pam Bondi says the death penalty is a possibility for accused killer DeCarlos Brown Jr.
The steps are we charge, then we indict, then legally we make the decision whether or not to seek the death penalty. That is certainly on the table once he is indicted for this horrific crime.
NewsNation weekend anchor Anna Koyman is live for us in Charlotte this morning. And Anna, Republicans are really underscoring this tragedy to boost President Trump's national crackdown on crime.
Good morning, Marky. Good morning to everyone at home. Republicans say the violent stabbing of Iryna Zarutska really underscores the need for President Trump's tough-on-crime agenda. They're blaming what they call soft Democratic policies for keeping repeat offenders like accused killer DeCarlos Brown Jr. on the streets.
Democrats have chosen to side with criminals. Their policies of appeasement, their weak on crime policies, their open door and revolving door policies in our criminal justice system and jails have allowed murderers back on the streets time and time again. We see crime gripping every one of our major cities across North Carolina, which is also a national epidemic that President Trump is attempting to tackle.
But defense attorneys point out Brown's most recent charge was for making 911 calls, not something more serious like drugs, weapons, or a violent crime of some sort. And Charlotte attorney Aaron Lee says there was no reason for the magistrate to keep him locked up.
Under a rebuttable presumption, there is no assurances that this individual will come back to court or that he will not be a danger to the community. None of those conditions applied into Carlos Brown's case, so there was no rebuttable presumption that he was going to be a danger.
Still, President Trump is calling for the death penalty in Brown's case. But Democratic leaders in Washington are blasting the president and other Republicans, saying leaders should focus on solutions, not scoring political points.
I think it's outrageous that people are trying to politicize the death of this wonderful young lady. It's outrageous that anyone would politicize their death. What decency do people have at a moment like this, as opposed to trying to find common sense solutions?
Well, a candlelight vigil is set for September 22nd at the train station where Iryna Zarutska was last seen alive. Meanwhile, a GoFundMe page for Iryna Zarutska's family has topped $328,000 at last check. And DeCarlos Brown Jr., the suspect, remains in jail awaiting his first court appearance, Markey, which will be September the 19th.
Just unbelievable. Our continued thoughts with her family this morning. Anna, thank you. Remember, everybody, you can catch Anna Koyman every weekend at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central.
Friday, this gruesome video was released of this 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee, Iryna Zarutska. And she came here and wound up being stabbed and murdered August 22nd by a deranged black man named DeCarlos Brown Jr. The incident is now completely politically weaponized, and in my opinion, for the wrong reasons. No question, Brown is a perfect poster boy for a crazy killer that the system ignored. He is. Arrested over 14 times, spent multiple years in prison on an armed robbery rap, got out early, reportedly a schizophrenic, reportedly homeless. The only box he doesn't check for the boogeyman is if he were here illegally. My problem is the mentally ill are not driving our crime issues any more than illegal entrants are, unless you cherry pick and say one is too many. But crime is on the agenda, and this is a great motivator for the right, hence why our president waded right into it, saying that her blood is on the Democrats' hands for refusing to lock him up. And he asked why the media is ignoring this story. And he attacked the judge, a black female, for letting this guy go free and to kill. Now, who can defend the killer? Who can say this is not a shameful failure? No reasonable person. Now you got some crazies on the left that are trying to fundraise for the killer, but they also want to globalize the intifada. So they're nuts. They're not the majority. They're the few. How does this outrage make anything better? That's my concern. I see this as being another example of our extreme political poison. Not because it's wrong to see this as wrong, but because there's nothing here to make it right. And we need to be able to fix problems at some point in this society and not just exploit them to show that the other side is worse. So let me decode for you how this is being done and what's not being done. The media angle is simple, if simplistic. We don't care because the victim is white and we only care about black victims. And they list all the media that didn't cover it. Now, NewsNation isn't on their list because we have covered it, but not to drive white fright or any other fringe agenda. This should not have happened. And it stings that not just this guy killed, not just that he killed a pretty white woman, but he killed someone who fled violence in Ukraine, came here as a refugee to be safe in America, only for this to happen. But the media doesn't care about white female victims, especially pretty ones? Are you kidding me? When is the last time you heard about a missing black woman? They go missing and murdered all the time. But you know Natalie Holloway. You know Gabby Petito. You know Lacey Peterson. And I'm not saying those stories don't deserve coverage. Of course they do. I covered each and all of them. But you never heard of Marcy Peterson, did you? Lacey, yeah. Marcy, no. Latasha Coleman, Angela Fuller, who are they? Young black women who are missing right now. So yeah, there's a bias, but it's not the one that the right is selling. The real problem with the concern is what is being called for as a supposed fix, which would fix nothing. Do we have a problem with policing the mentally ill? Yeah. Do we have a problem with different kinds of violent crimes that are popping up in places? Yeah. Is part of it a far left agenda of decriminalizing too much and in too many places? Yeah. So what's the solution? Kill Brown. The death penalty for him. Since when does the death penalty reduce crime? With anyone, anywhere, let alone, you think you're going to be able to kill someone in America who doesn't know why he did what he did? The right says this is about justice. But it seems to me like it's more about doing what works for just us, meaning those who are afraid of guys like this and want to make it look like the left is the source of all the problems. And I say that because of how it's been treated. What Elon Musk seized on. Once again, the supposed genius saying something that I can only really describe as stupid. Data shows that you and I are much more likely to be killed by someone in our own race. And of course, the fringe left made it worse by supporting the killer. I get that. I get condemning that. It's not where my head is. I'm tired of who's worse. I want to know what makes it better. The issue is the system, and we know what is wrong. Yes, the non-prosecution. Yes, the cashless bail, other policies. So address them with better ideas, especially for the mentally ill and violent. But where are they? The death penalty or punishment for the judge who let Brown walk in January? Sounds tough, right? And that judge does happen to be a black woman. So, you know, that's a little bit of a sensitivity also, right? But I think that part of it loses some punch when you learn why the judge let him off. Do you know what the charge was? Because a lot of the suggestions in the storytelling is that he had done something violent and she let him go. You know what he was arrested for on her watch? A misdemeanor for calling 911. Why did he call 911? He called 911 because he thought that there was a man-made substance that was controlling his mind. A competency exam was ordered. You know what that is, to see whether or not the guy's sane. He never showed, so it never happened. Should he have been locked up in prison? No, he should have been in a hospital. But we don't have the facilities, we don't have the system, we don't have the follow-through. This is a schizophrenic, homeless man. And the system failed to treat him the way it should have. And it happens all the time. But what's the fix? Killing him? Punishing the judge for a misdemeanor on a 911 call? My biggest problem is that we're just exploiting the problem to say who's wrong and not working on anything to make it right. And there are solutions. Why is crime down nationwide? Biggest reason? The economy's doing okay for most. And that is the greatest predictor. It's not black or white, it's green that decides who's going to commit crimes and when mostly. So why is crime down in areas like New York City? And it is down. I know you don't think it is because you've been reading the papers and everybody says the city's a disaster, but that's because they're cherry-picking crimes like this that affect the white and the affluent. But if you look at the places where you have poor people and minorities, in New York City, crime is down. Same with Baltimore. Why? The economy, but they're employing more police resources and precision policing. They're doing it better, data-driven, and they're investing in programs to keep kids and repeat offenders off the streets. That's not sexy. That's not scary. You don't want to talk about that, and that's why we don't talk about answers, especially when it gets to dealing with the mentally ill. Maybe we should, though. If you're going to care about the problem, maybe you should care about the solution, and you're not going to kill your way out of it by killing mentally ill people who do things or punishing judges for being overwhelmed by a system. But maybe I see it wrong. Maybe I'm missing why this is so politically palatable. Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.